My name is Thomas T Gakuru. I came from Kiambu in Kenya. I came to write this book not because I had planned, it's just because I was researching about my heritage. Somebody had accused us, when I say us, I mean people from Africa, that we sold them as slaves into America and other places. That kind of disturbed me because in my life, none of my ancestors were known to be slave dealers. And also, I had never been told of something like that. So it kind of disturbed me, and for 2 years, I decided to research about it. When I did research, going backwards from what I know about our people, I couldn't go very far because we were told that we came from Mukoroine Wanyagathanga, somewhere in Muranga. And there was nothing else after that. No matter how much I tried, I could not get it. But you remember that most of the writing was done by the white man or the colonialists. The Bantu people is quite a big family, like the Kikuyus, we have the Luyas, we have the Kambas, we have the people from Tanzania, like the Chagas. We have even the people from the coasts who are called the Mijikenda. They are all what you call the Bantu family. We have them in other parts of Africa, like in West Africa, we have the Igbos, we have them all the way to South Africa, the Lembas, and many, many more. And since it was such a big family, it behoved us to try to see how did we end up being all over the continent. And how did we end up selling our brothers? Because it means if we sold the guys that we went to slavery in the Americas and other places, then they must be our people. That's when I started and decided, okay, if I cannot go much further with that, let me go and look at the Bible. The Bible has all the answers as far as we are concerned. Or as far as I'm concerned, the Bible is all about the human beings. So when I went into the Bible, I remember that after Noah's flood, which of course was not Noah's flood, he survived it with his 3 sons and their wives and Noah's wife. That's 8 people. So it shouldn't be hard to trace our ancestry from Noah all the way to being a Kikuyu or being a Bantu.
Urge each and every one of us not to just read through it, but to study, interrogate, and have a relationship with this book. And anything about identity, because a man has not started living until the day you discover who you really are.
So, being a black man from Africa, it was obvious we were Africans. So, it was easy because Africans had 3 families. We had the Egyptians, we had the Ethiopians, we had the Libyans, and the Canaanites. I mean, you were all of them were. But much as I looked, I could not connect as the Bantu people with one of those 4 families. So I still had to go back to Noah and try to follow each and every son of Noah. And all the sons of Noah, you could figure out where they went, except the children of Israel. They kind of disappeared, and of course the Canaanites who instead of settling in Africa, they settled in Mesopotamia. So I decided, well, why not? Let me check the children of Israel, because they disappeared. And the history I know about them and what is in the Bible from around 700 something, maybe 772, all the way to 70 AD, they were being enslaved all over the places. They are uprooted from their homeland in Israel, and most of them ended up all over the world. But it was interesting to note that when the Israelites were disappearing from their homeland, most of the time they would end up in Egypt. And that was a question I had to answer myself, because if you're hiding or you're running away and you're a white man, you don't go and hide in a black neighborhood, and that is what they were doing. Until I also realized that all along the Bible has been telling us that the Israelites were not white people. The Israelites were actually black people.
So I was thinking about writing, and when God spoke to the prophet Habakkuk and gave him a vision, basically he was telling him, don't keep this vision just inside your head. Write it down with a pen and write it on the tablet. Now, have you ever thought, if the people who received the vision and the prophetic messages from God never wrote them down, have you ever thought that today we would not have the Bible?
They disappeared into Egypt, and that was it, until almost 2,000 years later, they appeared in 1947 as Jewish people coming from Europe, and bell rang. These guys disappeared into Africa. 2,000 years later, they appear out of Europe. I don't know what magic would have happened for it to happen that way, but we had now another thing to research. Who are those in Israel? Because if they are the children of Israel, we need to know how they came from Africa and all over the world and ended up in Europe, in two places, in Eastern Europe and around Spain. That's why we have the Ashkenaz Jews and we have the Sephardic Jews. So those two scenarios required a lot of thinking about and finding out how does it all figure out. And by the grace of God, because I don't think that this was a human effort or anything, I believe it is the Spirit of God, and I was able to try and connect the two. That after the children of Israel disappeared into Africa, mostly, they are the people who became the Bantus.
You are sharing the helicopter? And anything else that we do not know about you. And ladies and gentlemen, bring it out. It was not for you to keep.
Amen.
It was for you to share.
Amen.
What I have as GG, let me not hide it. And that's why we have constipated Christians.
They went and hid in Africa, and they changed their names. They called themselves other things. But if you look, you'll find that all of them, no matter what they call themselves, they have a lot of things which are in common. The way they bring up their children, the way they do their marriage, the way they worship God. All these things, you see, they have something in common. Unlike others who would want to call them themselves the Jews or the Israelites. The other interesting thing is, if you look at the Bantu, or even when you check in your history or geography, the Bantu people are not described as a people who came from somewhere else. They are described as a people on the move. It's called the Bantu expansion in Africa. You ask yourself, Africa, around that time, there were not so many people. Why were they footloose? Why were they all the time they are on the move? They land in Central Africa. The next time you hear them, they are in Tanzania, they are in Kenya, they are in the coast, they are in Central Africa, in Central Kenya, they are in South Africa. There were not very many people to warrant all that kind of movement, unless they were hiding or they were running away from something. And to me, they were running away from a very, very powerful enemy, an enemy that was determined to finish them from the face of the earth. If you look like in Kenya, we have the people we call the Nile Hamites. It tells that these are people who came to Kenya or down the Nile. That's why they are called Nile Hamites. So they are the true people who are the Africans, or let me not say Africans, I will say they are the Hamites, the children of Ham. But what about the Bantu? The Bantu were not Hamites. So anyway you look at it, they must have come from somewhere else. And that is why I contend that the Bantus were originally the Israelites, and the Israelites or the Bantus were sold into slavery by the Africans, who I have qualified now, and the Arabs. The Africans and the Arabs knew that these people were not indigenous. So they accommodated them, they tolerated them, but they still knew these were not their kin. So when the white men dangled some money in front of them, they quickly grabbed these people. And since they were always moving, they were not in one locale, it means they were usually not in a very big kind of population density. So it was easy to grab them. And that is how our people who are Bantus, they came, they were grabbed by the Africans and the Arabs. They were sold to the Europeans, into the Americas, most of them into South America and North America. And they were told, you are Africans. They were not told they are Israelites. But the white man knew. Why? If you look at the logs of the ships that brought them here, you'll be surprised to find that those logs have names of Israelite names. How did that happen? I'll leave that for you to answer that question.
This book, so that it may transform, liberate, and set people free. We bless our brother. All raise your book as you want to add him. We speak life to his life. We speak prosperity, more knowledge, more wisdom, more patience. May he be blessed with his family, now and forevermore. In Jesus' name. Let us put our hands together, even as we shout to the glory of God for the good job, even as we continue to read this book. God bless you.
One thing, I didn't start this book by intending to write it, but when I had written the book, my family convinced me all this knowledge I had gathered. I used to tell them what I have discovered, and it was very exciting knowing our history, and some of it very painful. And I remember when you do this thing, you get a privy to a lot of information which is not good for anybody, nobody, and so it's very painful, especially when you realize that those are your people that it happened to. And when I was telling my family that way, especially my wife, they encouraged me to write it into a book. Later, one of my friends, he told me, it's good to write a book because the younger generations, even if nobody else reads the book, my grandchildren will read and know what their grandfather said, or what their grandfather had to say, or what their ancestors had to say. Like I have said in the book, we used to have storytelling at the campfire when we were waiting for dinner to be cooked or something like that. We never do it anymore. You find everybody nowadays, they dash into their room with their laptop or with their phone or their books. We have very little time to tell stories that we used to tell. And that is, as a people, we are not very good at reading. Mostly, the information that we give to our younger generation comes from storytelling, which is lacking now. The information we have must be passed on. And since we are not telling stories verbally or orally, we must write. And that is why I am glad that finally I was able to write. And technology has helped us so much nowadays. It is much easier to write and much cheaper. So I believe that that's what we should be doing, and much more of it, so that we don't die as the older generation with the knowledge we have. If my ancestors had written some of the things, I went looking, and I wouldn't have done that. Some of it I have to read from even Europeans. I have one book from a person from America, and he's writing about the last British Gulag. What the British did to the Mau Mau fighters. So if we do not write, others will write, and they will write it according to how they would want to twist the history.